I'm going to show you the best way to terminate this wire and attach it to your DIY amplifier. Stay tuned for more. You're watching Netmo. Hi everyone, this is Netmo, and here's a short how-to video specifically on how to crimp a ferrule connector on your wire to get the best connection possible on these circuit board screw down terminals. Now these type of connections can be found on most of the amplifiers which are sold on Parts Express, and they have a wide selection of DIY amplifiers, and a lot of these amplifiers for the money are just absolutely amazing. And as long as the amplifier is paired up with the right speaker and given the appropriate amount of power, then it works out great. Now, one of the biggest complaints I've seen online is the connector, and a lot of people complain about the connector and that it should be a typical screw down for a spade, or just use something else that's not this. But this type of connector actually works very well, providing that you prep the wire correctly. And once you do so, not only are you going to prevent from shorting out any of the outputs on the amplifier or even the power, but it's just a professional looking connection. And I'm going to prepare a cable here for you to see how quickly this can be done and the tools you'll need. So obviously you'll have your wire. In this case, I'm going to use a 20 gauge wire. At the moment, I'm going to cut this, start fresh. I'm going to use from the Ferrule kit an AW10008. And if you can see, the connector has a plastic body, and it has the shaft where the wire goes into, and this is the portion of the connector we're going to crimp. Now the reason why it's AW10008, it's because the opening is a 1.00 millimeter square, and the 08 refers to the length of this connector, which is 8 millimeters. Okay, so this accepts a 20 gauge wire. So whenever you strip the wire, you want to make sure that the wire is stripped, not just the 8 millimeters, but just a little bit more. And the reason is that inside of the body of this connector, the plastic has somewhat of an angle to it. So if you end up stripping the wire a little bit shorter, then the bulk of your wire doesn't extend all the way into the connector, and it's basically, it stops short, right? Because the insulation on the wire itself is going to stop back over here. I don't know if you can see that, but it stops back here, right? So what we want to do is you can do 9 millimeters or 10 millimeters, or even if it's longer, and then you can cut the excess off of the front, right? So right now I have that amount. I'm going to give it a slight twist. So you don't want to overly twist your wires because that makes the wire fatter. So we take the wire, and without pulling back on any of the strands, we're going to insert the connector onto the wire, right? So you might be able to see there that the copper is coming up right almost to the edge, right? So in this case, this crimper I like this particular one because it's ratcheting and it's more of a hex. So they have another one, another model, which is it's four-sided. I like the hex because it tends to keep it a little bit more of a rounder shape. We're going to insert this into the crimper all the way down, release. And now what this does is you can see that it provides these small ridges on the shaft of the connector, right? So we have the wire, connector, insulation here. You can use this also for color coding. Its grip is phenomenal. And this type of connection actually works exceptionally well on any one of these connectors. The reason being is once you unscrew this and you insert this into it, it's going to be nice and tight. And when you tie this down, screw down the connector, now that connector is biting down on those little ridges. And look at that. I can pull on this, right? And I'll most likely run more risk of damaging the circuit board than this cable coming loose. And not to mention, once you have this, all the wires are inserted, you don't have to worry about any of the strands coming loose and touching one side or the other and shorting out anything. It's just a real clean way of making your connections, right? Now, if you observe, since we're using a 8mm connector, ferrule connector, you can see that there's a little bit of the shaft that is exposed right in here, right? A little bit right there. Now, if you want to have the connector sit as tightly as possible, then what I do is right there you can see the line on it. So I'm going to cut this right at the first line. All right, I just cut that little piece off, little piece right there. I'm going to take that and I'm going to reinsert that. Now you see what happens? Now it goes in just slightly a little bit more, right? You can see that just like there. Gives you a real clean finish. And this is how I prep all my wires whenever I deal with this type of connector. Anything that has to do with these amplifiers from Parts Express, this is using ferrules is the best way, in my opinion, to make your connections. Now, ferrules.com or ferrulesdirect.com actually is the correct website. ferrulesdirect.com. Let me open up you're gonna see it right here on the box. This is the SK600. It's a basic starter kit and it comes with different sizes. So this is not about plugging any company. This is just about showing that this is probably one of the largest companies when it comes to supplies for this type of product. This is a blue connector. This blue connector accepts a 16 gauge, no, sorry. This is a blue, which is a 14 gauge. Now, when you go onto the website, you're gonna notice that they'll have two different colors for the same sizes. And the reason being is that you have the American and you have the European. So for every connector, you're going to have two different colors. So if you're going to work with American products and you want to stick to an American standard color, then you're going to see that this starter kit has a specific group of colors. If you went and did something overseas, then you would see that the same sizes would be available in other colors. So something not to get confused at once you're on their website. This is perfect for larger gauge speaker wires. It's the 14 gauge. They do have larger than that. They have grays, they have blacks, which the gray is for a 12 gauge, the black is for a 10 gauge, which I am currently out of those. But it's just an amazing connector to use. And here is an example of a wire I have prepped. This is kind of like from my batch of wires which I use for testing. And in this case, we have ground in the middle here and VCC. VCC, for those who don't know or are new to electronics, VCC is referring to your positive. And I'm going to insert this positive into the VCC. I'm going to insert the black into the ground. And very quickly, that's a solid connection. That's not coming loose at all. These are extending out just a little bit more because I haven't cut these down. But once you're building your project, this is an amazing form of wire terminations. This is a small amplifier I picked up. It was, I believe, about $10. Parts Express has another model. This is using the TDA 7458 chip, I believe that's what it says. Don't have my glasses on. It's 2x100. That's more of a peak power, but this is still, for the price, it's an amazing amplifier. And once you get to work with some of these amplifiers, this is another amp which is great. It has your VCC and ground over here. So red and black, whatever colors you choose for your power, and you have your left and right outputs. So this is a great way of using these type of connectors, and that's so much better than having a bare wire and doing what most people do, which is twist a wire, insert this inside the amplifier. So they'll open this up, take the wire, insert it, especially if they're using a larger gauge wire. That does not work well and is a recipe for disaster, because as you're handling the amplifier, the wire is going to start to sneak out of the connector. It's going to then come close to the other one. It's going to short out the outputs, just short out whatever it is that you're connecting. And it's just not a clean finish. And so take that off. An example of how quickly this works. Open these two connectors up, and positive is right here. Close that down. Take the negative. Close that down. And there you go. Look at that. That's a great finish. You can bring this inside, put this inside of your cabinet, put a wire cover on it, take it to the output terminals on your casing, and if anyone ever looks inside, or even yourself, you'll know that you've done an amazing job. So I hope this information helps you out, gives you a little bit more of an understanding of the best way to utilize these type of screw down connections, and thank you for watching. You take care. Be strong.